In all honesty, I'm surprised that Kuzan is this low on the list myself. A year or two ago, I would have had him in the top 7 at least, and I almost didn't even have him in the top 10 this time around. Kuzan's strength doesn't need to be stated. He saw with Akainu for 10 days, was able to match blows with Garp when he wasn't going as hard as he could have been. We know what it looks like when Aokiji is going serious, and the fact that Hachinosu didn't get turned into a winter island is proof enough that he wasn't going all out, and he has insane stamina, speed, offense, and haki. Kuzan isn't someone I would have had on my list this time around if there wasn't one key thing concerning him that happened in Egghead, and that's him being put into the few characters that are going to be integral to the endgame of One Piece. Kuzan being up here out of all characters shows that he will be getting more narrative relevancy in the future of the story, and he's not done yet, and may still show out more combat-wise going forward. It's not that crazy to say that he could still be close to Akainu in terms of power and be on the higher level of fighters even after his loss. This is a man who had the potential to become a fleet admiral, was trained personally by Garp almost his entire time in the Navy, has a Logia fruit that might even be awakened, and has extremely powerful haki, seeing as he is able to match Garp and Akainu. I see him still being over any of the other admirals minus Akainu, and over characters like Loki and Big Mom, while being on par with those like Kaido and a healthy old Whitebeard. Kuzan is definitely worthy of being in the top 10 to this day, even though we have received some new characters who should logically beat him out. One of those new characters that might end up beating out Aokiji happens to be Garling. Garling, as much of a fraud as he is, narratively should be very impressive strength-wise. Disregarding his immortality gimmick, it's quite possible he possesses advanced Conqueror's haki and at the very least has some proficiency in both armament and observation haki. Seeing as he is the father of Shanks and Shamrock, Oda logically won't make him a complete jobber in the current story, especially now that he's received some Gorosei amps from Imu, meaning he might also have a transformation ability that would boost his physical stats significantly and maybe even give him some hacks that he can use in combination with his existing moveset. Just like Kuzan, he was also in the final saga panel in Egghead, and seeing as he is the newest Gorosei, the first time we've ever seen a character become one of the elders, he's obviously going to show out heavily once he does make his move. I do have him and Kuzan relative, but in all honesty, if he wasn't in the final war panel, I wouldn't have even put him on the list personally. But narrative importance does play a massive role in the strength of a character, especially when that character plays a large role in a major faction in the story. As the former commander and supreme commander of the Holy Knights, his power should be incredible, at least on par with that of the admirals, and with the amps he should have received and the narrative weight placed on him currently, he beats out Aokiji slightly, leading me to place him at number 9. Continuing with the figure lens, I have Shamrock up next. Shamrock being over Garling might seem weird, but the reason I have him over his father is because Shamrock is going to have a much clearer and more high-level combat role than Garling will in the final war. As the current commander of the Holy Knights, Shamrock is going to be on the field doing damage, whereas Garling might not perform the same kind of duties. With Shamrock sharing Shanks' likeness, although that has no bearing on his narrative strength, I don't believe Oda will ever draw Shamrock getting absolutely obliterated in battles, because it's essentially like drawing Shanks getting obliterated in battles. Shamrock and Shanks are now being placed on the same level currently at the age of 24, meaning they should at bare minimum be in the same ballpark currently. I do think Shanks is a decent bit stronger, but with Shamrock possessing a mythical Zoan Fruit sword and quite possibly insane haki as well, just like his brother, and also being in his prime at 39, I think it's safe to say that his strength should exceed that of even his father's. It's not necessarily confirmed, but it's almost guaranteed that the silhouetted figure in the final saga panel is more than likely Shamrock as well, so that just gives him even more narrative importance going forward to back up his strength spot. Everyone in the 7 to 10 range is interchangeable for me, but their order is based off my own perception of how important they will be to the narrative combat wise, and with everything I've already listed for Shamrock, I think it's fair to place him at this point. Luffy is someone who you could argue should be higher or lower, but regardless, you have to acknowledge that he has now broken into the top 10 characters currently. Luffy has proven himself on numerous occasions since Wano and with his upcoming battle against Imuko, and portrayed superiority to Loki, as well as being close to the time where he should be able to challenge Shanks. I think it's clear Luffy should be this high up in the current character's strength bracket. He has incredible speed, offense, durability, and with the power of Gear 5 essentially being imagination, his hacks is also incredibly crazy as far as battles go. There aren't many people who I can see beating out Luffy solidly in multiple fights because Gear 5 just seems to be the dominant power nowadays, especially with all the Joy Boy and Nika gas we're getting. Narratively, we're now at the tail end of the story. Luffy's strength won't increase that exponentially from here on out, so him being in the top 7 in the verse right now positions him perfectly to get to the top 1 spot by the end of the story. For reference on this list, just so you guys can all keep track of what I'm really saying, since Luffy is the first character on the list that we actually have top 10 feats for outside of Kuzan with Garp, if Luffy is 7th on the list, I'd be placing Kaido at 8th if he were to be on the list. Luffy might shoot up through the list by the end of Elbaf in all honesty, by the time he gets his Conqueror's haki boost to counteract the immortality Imu gives to others, but for right now, the number 7 spot is where Luffy belongs. I was gonna have Dragon higher than Blackbeard because of his hype and for the sake of my own sanity, because I'm not trying to argue with you guys about his strengths and how shonen tropes say he should be able to high def prime guard because he's his son and obviously surpassed his dad, yada yada. But then I remembered Blackbeard literally ran Dragon off his main base and forced him to hide out on Kamabaka. Dragon's only on this list because of his hype, which I personally don't believe nearly as much as you guys do, even if I do think he will be an extremely powerful fighter. Of course I think he's strong, but people who say he needs to be top 5, much less top 3, or god forbid top 1 is completely unnecessary. Dragon being that strong just makes him look pathetic as a character for not making any moves earlier. It's implied that Dragon's preparations are made with the Holy Knights in mind as the main combatants of the world government, as the fact that there was a king of the world or that Imu is a king of the world is something Ivankov didn't know and something that Dragon doesn't speak as if he knew about, as well as the fact that he never saw Imu's power on God Valley, meaning that it's not like Dragon is just at the top of the verse behind Imu but doesn't think he's ready to beat him yet. It just means that he's an extremely powerful fighter and just hasn't made his move as yet because he doesn't think he can steamroll the entire world government, which mind you, outside of Imu, he should be able to do if he was a noticeable degree stronger than Garp. Logically, Dragon being significantly stronger than his father in his prime, having a massive army yet still doing nothing his entire time until just recently makes no sense if the Holy Knights are what he's preparing for, meaning logically he would at best be just as strong as Prime Garp, which in my opinion and narratively makes perfect sense. Dragon clearly doesn't fight as much as Garp or Luffy does, so him getting insane haki blooms that way literally makes no sense. Even as a 17-year-old, Dragon is portrayed to be much weaker than Luffy was at that same age, and he leaves the Navy shortly after God Valley, so it's not like he was receiving training from Garp most of his life. I think Dragon's strength is built up during the time between God Valley and the Ohara incident where the Revolutionary Army truly takes shape, and his battles during that time would more than likely be against Vice Admiral Akainu, maybe Vice Admiral Kizaru, and maybe Vice Admiral Aokiji. Dragon's title as the world's worst criminal has very little to do with his own personal strength and everything to do with the fact that he's mobilized a global army to actively fight against the world government and has numerous kingdoms following his cause. Dragon has essentially mobilized the world government and navy against the world government and navy, but that doesn't require him to be the strongest man alive outside Imu to do so. Him being at number 6 is completely fair in my eyes, and if you disagree, that's cool because he has absolutely zero feats to suggest he's stronger, and the only conflict we've ever heard of him getting into was with Blackbeard, and he lost that confrontation, and Blackbeard was capable of scrapping with CP0 right after that, so either Dragon just took his men and ran from Blackbeard, or Blackbeard is just firmly over Dragon. Either way, unless you got Blackbeard in the top 3, currently Dragon doesn't get to the top 5. Right above Dragon and Luffy, and in my humble opinion still too low, is Blackbeard. Some of you might say this is too high. Some of you might say he probably doesn't even make it to the top 10 based off his showings, but some of you need glasses and I'm not gonna be the one who's going to give them to you. Narratively, it makes no sense for anyone who's currently beneath Blackbeard on this list to be capable of defeating Blackbeard currently. I've already explained Dragon, and Luffy is definitely not beating Blackbeard in a 1v1 if they were to fight right now. It makes no sense for Shamrock to be capable of defeating him either, since he's literally just a narratively weaker version of Shanks, and the same thing goes for Garland because we know how the bloodline rules work. He's definitely over Aokiji because there's no chance that Oda has Aokiji stronger than Blackbeard, and is still on his crew because there's only ever been a single instance in the story where a crewmate was stronger than the captain, and that was with Mihawk and Buggy, and even then they're not really crewmates, they're just in an alliance together technically. If I have Luffy, Kuzan, Garland, and Shamrock as interchangeable and Dragon above them, then Blackbeard being superior to Kuzan is obviously superior to everybody who I believe is relative to him, and if he already has portrayed superiority to the Dragon, then obviously Dragon is below him too. Blackbeard has stated superiority to Rayleigh, who should be relative to Gabon, who was thrashing base Luffy, and since Blackbeard has the ability to negate fruit powers, he thrashes that same base Luffy even harder than Gabon does. He has full mastery of the Gura Gura and would logically be superior to Old Ray, Gabon, and Old Garp as well. Blackbeard's personality and track record of fights has no bearing on this list because when it comes down to it, Blackbeard wins when he needs to. He has impressive endurance even with his pain enhancement causing him issues because he was capable of rebounding from a shock willy instantly, which is the same attack Big Mom was begging Law to stop using, and was something capable of breaking her bones, meaning most characters aren't dealing serious damage to Blackbeard even if he rolls around on the ground in pain after their hits. Blackbeard should also narratively be at bare minimum this high because with all of the new importance he's gotten from the God Valley flashback and his future trajectory seeing a massive boost, it's quite possibly he goes from top 6 currently to top 2 of all time by the end of the story. If I didn't have to hold my tongue for the sake of my own sanity, I probably have him at 4 or 3, but there are characters on the list who I can make an argument for being stronger than Blackbeard is currently, and I know the consensus is that those characters should be over him regardless. One of those characters being Akainu. Now Akainu Akainu over Blackbeard isn't something I'm too heavy on personally, but logically it makes sense to me simply based off narrative. Blackbeard isn't at his peak potential yet, but Akainu should be. Akainu's put in the same bounty bracket as Whitebeard and Roger, and unlike Dragon, he earned his spot as Fleet Admiral through straight combat and is a much more combat-oriented character as far as the story is concerned. As we get more and more revealed on Prime Garp, Akainu, who hasn't shown his full power, will scale off that Prime Garp as he is now currently the pinnacle of the Navy. It makes no sense for the Navy to be the strongest it's ever been currently and not have the strongest Navy man we've ever seen to be in his peak in it currently. Akainu has the greatest offensive abilities stated flat out, has proficiency in armament and observation haki, and if you're going to tell me I can't say Akainu has advanced conqueror's haki, then I can't say that Mihawk has it or Dragon has it either. It's very clear that Akainu is going to get that ability in the future of the story. If it's an ability the strongest characters possess, then the man who is at the head of the greatest military organization in the series will obviously have it, not even going into the fact that Akainu ticks every box for a conqueror. He will be one of the endgame matchups for Luffy and would logically scale off wherever Luffy currently is in the story, meaning he only gets upscaled as Luffy gets upscaled. Akainu, despite what the community thinks of him, is not a bum because we've never seen his full power or anything comparable to it. Aokiji and Kizaru have not shown anything indicative of their maximum output in a battle, and Akainu, who is stronger than both, has not shown anything similar to it either. Narrative portrayal and logical trajectory are both key in being able to understand where a character will end up, and both of these things say that Akainu should at least be in the top 5. Breaking into the top 3 now is Shanks. Now Shanks being top 3 isn't surprising. Off his hype alone, he gets to the top 5. With not only the Roger angle, but now the Fig Garland and Celestial Dragon angle, Shanks has narrative and portrayal that places him at the top of the verse in terms of strength. He will fight Luffy at some point in the future whether you want to believe it or not. Luffy literally says that Shanks is somebody he wants to beat, and in the first chapter says he's going to get a ship and crew greater than Shanks is and then prove he's a greater pirate by becoming the Pirate King. We know now that becoming the Pirate King means solidifying yourself as the greatest in your era, and in the current era that means trouncing both the admirals and the emperors shown by Kaido, Big Mom, Chinjiao, and Luffy himself. Shanks, just like Akainu, would upscale off of wherever Luffy upscales because Luffy is not going to surpass Shanks without first proving he has surpassed Shanks in a battle with Shanks. Shanks is essentially the Roger of this generation, and Roger was the most dominant figure in his era. Shanks being this high is only logical. I was going to put Blackbeard over him for the sake of my agenda, but despite the fact that literally everything in the story suggests that Shanks cannot beat Blackbeard, like I said, my sanity won't be able to handle the level of nonsense Shanks fans will spew to justify why Shanks should be stronger. In essence, I'm saying that Blackbeard, Akainu, and Shanks are all interchangeable in the top 5 as far as spots go. The only reason Shanks is above them is because he has more aura than they do, because we've never seen him get injured in a conflict on screen. Now obviously the only character left who can take the number 2 spot is Mihawk. Mihawk is only above Shanks because of 1, his skill statement, and 2, his title. Titles in One Piece don't really mean anything for the most part, but for Mihawk to be called the world's strongest swordsman, not have anything that indicates he got weaker over time or is out of his prime, and has his title tied to the dreams of one of the main characters of the story, Mihawk has to be over Shanks. But this doesn't mean he can't be interchangeable with Akainu and Blackbeard because they aren't swordsmen. What I'm saying is everyone in the top 5 minus the top 1 is interchangeable, but Shanks and Mihawk are not interchangeable. Shanks is definitively below Mihawk on any list. The gap between them, however, is indescribably small. Like I keep saying, Mihawk and Shanks should have relative power output, but seeing as he is the greater fighter of the two, he would be considered the stronger one as he is the one who would win more fights between them. If Roger and Garp were to fight and Roger is a better fighter than Garp, he would win more fights even though they have equal power. The term strongest covers a multitude of things outside of I hit harder than you hit. Mihawk is one of the few characters left for Oda to showcase as far as powers go. I mean, even Emo and Joy Boy have shown us more in terms of what their abilities entail compared to Mihawk, and as far as the story is concerned, that means Mihawk will scale to wherever the story is by the time he showcases his abilities. Him being top 2 currently isn't crazy, but he could be top 4 as well. Last on the list is obviously Emu. Emu currently has a decent gap between him and the current state of the verse. That gap will close as the story progresses obviously, but I don't think there's anyone in the verse right now who can even land a serious hit on Emu besides maybe Blackbeard, and that's if the Yami Yami can negate his immortality. We've never seen anything from him combat wise, and his AP is actually pretty garbage as he couldn't even kill Sabo while being both bloodlusted and enraged, but his hacks most definitely closes that gap. I could have included all the Gorosei up here as well because they also have immortality, but that's a waste of a perfectly good list, so they aren't here. If Emu didn't have the immortality and Domi Reversi gimmicks, I think he would still be up here in the top 3, more than likely also still the top 1, as he was a fighter even before he became the king of the world, as he was one of the original 20 kings who fought against Joy Boy. His portrayal and narrative definitely places him at the pinnacle currently, so it's kind of obvious that he's up here. There's no list that's going to be made this year that doesn't have Emu at top 1 unless it's an all-time list. Subscribe and turn on your notifications because I will be dropping my top 30 of all time pretty soon as well. However, regardless of if it's with or without his hacks, he's definitely earned his spot as number 1 currently. For the honorable mentions, the only character I have is Loki. I was considering putting Loki over Aokiji because of his portrayal in Elbaf, him logically being close to where Herald is, and him having some legendary devil fruit that makes him a threat so great that he could be a key part in overthrowing Imu, but I haven't seen enough from Loki to justify putting him over characters like Aokiji or Luffy. He lost to Shanks 6 years ago before the current story, and I don't think that version of Shanks would be stronger than he is now, and I don't think that battle would have been an extreme diff or some multi-day bloodbath either. His bounty of 2.6 billion would be entirely based off his own strength threat level, as no one would sail with him from Elbaf and he would never ally with any humans, so with the admirals being placed at 3 billion and their bounty also being based solely off their strength because they have no swing in the government as far as their own agendas go, which is why him being slightly under Aokiji is fair in my opinion, but by the end of Elbaf he could shoot up into the top 10, so I have him here in the honorable mentions. That's my top 10 for the end of this year. Power scaling this year was absolutely crazy with all the Emu stuff, God Valley hype, and Egghead anime shenanigans. We've definitely had feasts for the base, but now that the year is at its end, this is my takeaway as far as the strength of characters is concerned currently. If you stayed to the end of the video, let me know what you think. Am I absolutely tripping or did I hit a good one on the list? If you'd like to discuss this list with me further or even hop in a voice call with me and let me know what you think about anything, the Discord is gonna be in the description and I am in there pretty often so you can catch me most times. Like I said before, stay tuned for the top 30 of all time that I'll be dropping. It's more than likely gonna drop after my next video close to the end of the month to close out the year. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more high quality One Piece content. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.